On this week's episode of the Best of Johnston County podcast, we're having a special edition episode which we call Ask Jonathan Breeden Anything. And in this podcast, I answer questions about life after divorce. What documents should you immediately change when you get divorced? What should happen with the beneficiaries on your life insurance? What should you do about your will? What should you do about car insurance and credit cards and joint bank accounts? If you've ever had any questions about what you should do as a person who is getting divorced or has gotten divorced as it relates to your financial future and legal documents to make sure that you are separate from that person that you divorced forever, this podcast will answer a lot of those questions, so listen in.
Welcome to another episode of Best of Johnston County, brought to you by Breeden Law Office. Our host, Jonathan Breeden, an experienced family lawyer with a deep connection to the community, is ready to take you on a journey through the area that he has called home for over 20 years. Whether it's a deep dive into the love locals have for the county or unraveling the complexities of family law, Best of Johnston County presents an authentic slice of this unique community.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Best of Johnston County podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden. And on today's episode, we're having a special edition episode that we like to call Ask Jonathan Breeden Anything. And in this episode, our social media coordinator, Raina Birch, is going to ask me, Jonathan Breeden, about life after divorce. We're going to talk a little bit about documents you should change, things that the divorce does not automatically change, and for you to recognize if you're going through a divorce, that the divorce is a beginning, not an end. And normally on this podcast, I, Jonathan Breeden, interview interested community members, local politicians, community leaders, small business owners about what they love about Johnston County and the services they provide. And every once in a while, we do one of these special edition episodes where I answer common family law questions, because that's what we do here at the Breeden Law Office and have done that for over 25 years. You ready, Raina?
I am ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready, but I got to make sure I remind everybody to like, follow, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you're seeing it, whether it be on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, LinkedIn, or any of the other social media channels of the Best Johnston County Podcast. Best Johnston County Podcast comes out every single Monday and has now for almost 2 years. So go back and listen to some of our previous episodes. A lot of great people in Johnston County have been on. A lot of great episodes coming up in the future. If you love Johnston County as much as I do, this is the podcast for you. And more people subscribe, the more it tells the platforms that this is good content and promotes our podcast, so more people will become aware of it.
Yes. Good reminder. Excellent.
That's a good reminder of people, right? No doubt. All right.
So first question that everybody always asks right after a divorce, like, what legal documents do people need to update once they're divorced?
I think that they should really think about it as a brand new beginning, as I just said, and they should think about every legal document that they would have put in place, and just about all of them need to be changed.
Yeah.
I mean, really, to be honest. So the first one I would say would be your will. If you don't have a will, get a will.
Get one.
Most Americans do not have a will, but if you don't have a will, you need to get a will, and you need to say in that will who you want to have your personal property, your real property, intangibles, grandma's clock, whatever you want. Like, make sure you got a will so everybody knows what you want to see happen with whatever you have. And you don't want to die without a will. Then all the stuff gets divided through intestacy. We may do a podcast on that another day. And as I always say about intestacy is, it's not what you think it is.
Yes. And that's what people don't realize. Like, family law, everybody thinks divorce, but
Right.
it's also wills and estates and all of that.
Right. Life insurance policies.
Yes.
You need to update the beneficiary on any life insurance policy. And if it has been your ex-spouse, change it to somebody else. Change it to your children. Change it to your estate. Change it to NC State University. I love the Wolfpack. But do not leave it on the ex-spouse, because I get that call at least once every 6 to 12 months.
I believe it.
Where new wife calls me and says, husband has died.
Oh no.
And there was a $1 million life insurance policy that is still listing ex-wife from 15, 20 years ago as the beneficiary. And there's not anything I can do about that.
Because those override a will, right?
Right. They do.
The
right.
Whoever's
And
the beneficiary in the life insurance That's who it is.
And that is
no matter what the will says.
And that is a really bad phone call to have with somebody.
Because you can't give them any good news.
Right. It's not good news.
Yeah.
And it's truly unfortunate. So go change the beneficiaries on your life insurance. If you bought life insurance, you get it through work, or there's a death benefit through work or whatever, change the beneficiary. You should be reviewing those beneficiaries every 4 to 5 years anyway, but definitely change it from the ex-spouse, unless you have something in your custody order or in your divorce that says you have to maintain a life insurance policy and the ex-spouse is the beneficiary until the youngest child graduates from high school to make up for the child support that you would no longer be paying because you would be dead.
Yes.
But that is very rare. I see that in probably 0.1% of the custody and divorce cases I do.
I have that in mine.
So you have it in yours? Okay. So yeah. But that is a very rare thing. If you have that, then you have to do it. If not, change the beneficiaries of your life insurance. Will, life insurance. I would then change the beneficiaries on your stock accounts, your 401ks, your IRAs, any Edward Jones stock trade, Fidelity accounts, any of that. Those beneficiaries are outside the will. They have their own separate payable on death policies, and they need to be changed as well, because you probably already divided up those assets in the divorce. You got to keep half. The last thing you want to do is pass away and give the other half to the side that you just had to give half to.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you want them to have it, you want a divorce to start with. So, but I would say that's important as well. Bank accounts.
Oh, yes.
Go and get out of all joint bank accounts. You don't want any part of a joint bank account, because any money in a joint bank account belongs to both owners. So if your direct deposit is still going into the joint account, that other person can go the ex-spouse can go take your paycheck out and move it to a separate account, because money going into a joint account belongs to both of you as well, and as do the overdraw fees. If somebody were to overdraw that account, and that affects your credit, even though you may have forgotten that you had a joint account. So you need to run a credit report and make sure you know where all things that your name is attached to are. Credit cards. Get any joint credit cards, get rid of those, close them out, pay them off, whatever. Now, if you're an authorized user, then it's not going to affect your credit if they don't pay the credit card. But if somebody is an authorized user,
get
you
them
need
off
to
your account.
Get that off your account, right? You don't want them to be able to run up your credit card, whatever. So you want to make sure that your credit cards are only in your name. Car insurance. You want to go get your own separate car insurance. I wouldn't do that right at separation, but definitely by the time you divorce, North Carolina can't divorce for more than a year, go get your own car insurance. You don't be responsible for any accidents or anything that somebody else may have. You don't know who's driving those cars that you're insuring. Now that you were divorced, could be somebody that's not the best. Maybe they don't have a driver's license. You don't have any control over that, right? You don't know. So go get your own car insurance. Cell phone plans. Again, anything that is joint or was joint needs to be separated. And like I said, I'm not saying do all of this 1, 2, 3 weeks after you separate. But by the time we get to the divorce and the property is settled and it's been over a year, yes, all of this stuff needs to be separate. If you did not address the house in the divorce, which I hope you did.
I hope so.
Don't make that mistake.
We had a whole podcast.
We did an entire podcast. Go back a few weeks where we talk about what happens to the divorce and what happens to the divorce, to the house in a divorce. We won't repeat all of that here, but you do need to make sure that if you own a house with that person, that in the divorce or prior to the divorce, that the property case is pending, or you dealt with the property via separation agreement or equity distribution consent order, and what's going to happen to the house, where it is going to end up either being sold, or it's going to be one side, it's going to be one spouse's or the other spouse's, and the spouses get it is going to refinance it into their name. And if they can't refinance it, they're going to sell it or something to get that house. Because here's the thing, you don't want, and we're kind of elongating this, but if you start with there should be nothing joint anymore at the date of divorce at all. Like, you need to be completely separate individuals, as if you never got married, because once you divorce, if you didn't do a property settlement and you didn't do a separation agreement, and most people do, but not everybody, the court loses the jurisdiction to go back and divide up the marital property. It loses the jurisdiction to split the 401k, allocate who's going to get the proceeds from the house. All of that goes away if you're divorced and you didn't already settle it. And like I said in that previous episode, at least once a week, if not once every other week, we're getting a call here at the Breeden Law Office where they're saying we did an uncontested divorce ourselves 5, 10, 15 years ago. We never dealt with the house. And now I want to sell it. And the other side says I owe them half the equity currently that's in the house. And that is true because the other side is still a joint owner, even though they didn't pay one dime on that mortgage in the last 10 or 15 years. They are not responsible for any of the passive or active increase in its value, but yet they're still entitled because they're still on the house. So back to my thing. If you think, what do we have that both names are on? Cars, same way. Need to get the car in your name. If the car you're driving is titled in your ex-husband's name, he needs to sign it over to you, or you need to give him that car and go buy another car. You don't want to be driving a car that's not titled in your name.
Because I've heard cases where they'll call and say it's been stolen, and because
correct,
your name's not on it, and what are you going to do?
We've had that happen, and believe me, I've had many police officers call me and say, I'm with your client, Jane Doe, and she says that she's been driving this car. What do you know about it? I'm like, yes, officer, we're trying to deal with the end of the divorce. She does have permission to drive the car. No court saying she doesn't, and all of that. But yes, cars, same way. So that's the thing. And I think a lot of people, they like the idea of being divorced, but they don't like this. Like when we tell them this, we often will get pushed. Right. It's a lot of work, and we'll get pushback. And I'm like, you're divorcing this person, right? Like you don't want to be connected to them anymore. And really what it often comes down to is there are things that one spouse, often the husband, is paying for the wife, that the wife is now going to have to pick up that payment when it gets in her own name. And she doesn't want to pick up that payment, but the husband is making that payment to help the wife and to protect his credit. But now, a year into this, when we're getting divorced, year and a half later, like, you got to get the stuff in your own name.
Figure it out.
You're right. You need to start making your own house payment. You need to start making your own car payment. Start paying your own car insurance. Like, you're divorced. Like, if you need money, you should have gone and had a post-separation support hearing or an alimony hearing. Get child support to help pay for the stuff.
Have a year.
Right. I mean, right. There's a year before we get to the divorce
North Carolina.
itself. Right. Like at least a year. And so you need to be thinking about all that. But there's a lot of times where they don't want to do it. And then the other thing is, and I should have said this from the beginning, you got to make a budget, right? The number one thing you're going to do the first time you even, we're talking about divorce. I'm talking about the first time it crosses your mind that this marriage might not work out, you need to make a budget. You need to make a budget for where you are, and you need to make a budget for where you might be going. And that needs to be an ongoing process through the separation into the divorce. And it needs to be a realistic budget, not some pie in the sky budget, but a budget you can actually afford without going to credit cards. And I know your lifestyle may change a little bit, and you may not be able to eat out as much. And maybe you need a car that's not quite as expensive, and maybe you have to move into a house that maybe is a little smaller, or an apartment or something like that. But budgeting is crucial. Absolutely crucial in this process, and getting stuff in your own name so that you can pay it. Because the other thing that you run into here is, if your credit's not good, you need to get your credit fixed. Because it's going to be really hard to go set up your own stuff, your own credit cards, if your credit's not good. So one of the things you need to be doing when you start thinking about separation, or through the separation headed towards the divorce, is, how can I fix my credit? Talk to a credit counselor, that kind of stuff, debt relief agencies, stuff like that. Maybe you need to file for bankruptcy. I don't know. I'm not a bankruptcy lawyer, but these things are very important as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Have family law questions? Need guidance to navigate legal challenges? The compassionate team at Breeden Law Office is here to help. Visit us at www.breedenfirm.com for practical advice, resources, or to book a consultation. Remember, when life gets messy, you don't have to face it alone.
And so, to touch on that, because I know this is obviously more of just mainly a woman's issue, but when we say updating legal documents, obviously most women have to decide, Do I go back to my maiden name? Do I keep my married name? And so what are the steps you suggest they take if they want to go back to their maiden name? Because I know that's also even more paperwork than everything else. And it can be made even more difficult if they don't have it like in their decree or whatnot.
Right. Well, in North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
a woman going through a divorce can go back to any previous married name or their maiden name.
Oh.
A lot of people don't realize that.
I did not realize
right.
that.
You can go back to your maiden name or any previous married name.
Go ahead.
And oftentimes we will see people go back to a previous married name so that their last name and the children's last name are the same. So that people are like, why would you do that? Well, you want your last
I don't want to
name.
have to show my ID every time I pick up my kid.
right. The last names to sort of match, right? But the easiest way to do it is to the name change in the divorce decree.
Okay.
And certified copy of the divorce decree signed by the judge to, I believe you take the Social Security first.
Yes.
And Social Security card with the same Social Security number, and then you take your Social Security card and you go to the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Yep. You get a license.
And you change your driver's license. Understanding of how that works. If you don't get into the divorce decree, you can still do it. Social Security Administration has some paperwork that I believe you can fill out.
Yeah.
I think it's a little more complicated. I think it takes a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I am not a name change expert,
Yeah.
but I would advise you, if you want to change your name, that you go and you get it in your divorce decree.
Yep.
But you have to tell your attorney that that's what you want to do before you file it, because they have to ask for it in the divorce complaint as well. Like, I want to be divorced and I want my name back, and the clerk of court is going to charge you an extra $10 or $15 filing fee for the name change that the attorney has to pay when they file it. So you can't come back, you can't
be retroactive about it.
Right. You can't come back, the day before we go to divorce court, we're going to get you divorced and say, oh, can we change my name now? No, you got to do it as soon as you meet with the attorney, or when you go, if you're doing it yourself. Most actual divorces are done without attorneys.
Yeah.
You need to make sure you put it in there on the standard form and pay the extra $10 to the clerk, and then make sure you include the name change in your divorce decree.
Yes.
That's very important.
Yes. And I think a lot of that is, so, and we all know, well, I mean, as married women know this, when you go in to, get a new ID or whatever, and you have to, or vote or whatnot, like in some states, you have to show the progress of your name, how it changed, when it changed. So birth certificate, marriage license. And then if that divorce decree is going back, and, so like if you've had multiple name changes, you have to show a paper trail usually in order to prove that. So the divorce decree helps.
It does.
It
does. Putting the divorce decree is by far the best way to do it.
Yes.
But it is not the only way to do it.
Yes.
You would just need the divorce decree. Take it anyway.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
All right. So question number 2. So custody and support modifications. What kind of changes and circumstances might justify going back to court to modify child support orders or custody orders? And this is, like you said, it takes a year to get divorced in North Carolina. And that usually happens. There's usually a temporary custody order. And then by the end of that, there's a permanent custody order. But maybe after that, like down the road, what would justify a change in child support or a change in custody?
All right. So we're assuming in this question that you have an order signed by a judge.
Yes.
Right. Because every time we do these episodes, I'm like, do you have an order signed by a judge or not? But yeah. Okay. Now, if you have a temporary custody order, it warps into a permanent custody order after 1 year if nobody's attempted to have it reviewed.
Yes.
Temporary child support, sort of the same way. If nobody's attempted to have it reviewed, it kind of becomes a permanent child support order. If you have a temporary child support order and a temporary custody order, and it hasn't been a year, or you've been trying to get it reviewed, those can be modified without any substantial change in circumstances. They are temporary, they are non-appealable, and they can be changed by the judge for however the judge wants to change them. Right. If you have a permanent child support order, to modify a permanent child support order, there has to be 3 years between the order and the time you're asking for the change, or there has to be a substantial change, which is defined by the amount of child support owed going up or down 15% based on the current order. Not the amount of money the dad makes, not the amount of money the mom makes. It's the actual total child support amount in the formula when you consider health insurance, daycare costs, gross income, extraordinary expenses, all the things that went into the original child support worksheet. if the current numbers change and the number at the bottom goes up or down 15%, you could modify a child support order within the 3 years. Most often, somebody loses their job.
Yep.
Is the most common way to do it. A lot of people think when the child goes from full-time daycare to school, that's going to work. But what they don't realize is before school and after school care cost almost what full-time daycare costs. And it ends up not actually being a 15% change on the bottom of the sheet. We see that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
For custody, if you have a permanent custody order, in order to modify a permanent custody order, you have to be able to show a substantial change in circumstances that affects the welfare of the minor child.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not if I'm mom and I didn't have a lot of visitation because I was strung out on drugs or alcohol and now I'm clean, that's not enough. It's got to affect the child, right? So a lot of times you see relocations. One parent is going to leave the area, making a joint physical custody situation almost impossible.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Maybe one parent has gotten into trouble, DWI, drugs, alcohol. That could be a substantial change. One parent has decided to date or live with a registered sex offender. I cannot tell you how many of those cases I've had. Brayden, I know you're like, you cannot believe this, but I'm telling you, it is way more than I can even count. And it's like, what are you thinking, right? But they're not thinking. They're thinking they're in love with this person. They don't care that they're a sex offender, right? So, it's got to be substantial change. And it could be that maybe somebody's work schedule has made it where they can't get the child to and from school. And if you can't get the child to and from school, that's going to be a substantial change. But it has to be more than you don't like his new girlfriend, you don't like the new boyfriend, y'all disagree on everything to be disagreeable. It's got to be something for permanent change. It's got to be something substantial. And we've done some podcasts on that. You can go back and listen to some of those. Yes. We got some YouTube videos on it. So, but keep that in mind. But it is more than just, you got a burden of proof.
Yes.
In temporary situations, review of temporary and in temporary hearing for child support and custody, there is no burden of proof. The court is just going to do the best it can based on the findings of fact.
Yep.
Once you're trying to modify something, you then have the burden of proof to show that it is substantially changed. So the court now has the authority to change it. Because if you can't show a substantial change, the court does not have the authority to change its prior order.
Got it. And you mentioned this for child support, but that also, I want to know if it applies to custody. When you said, a job loss, obviously can significantly impact child support. Could that also significantly impact custody?
It can, if the person, loses their housing, or they have to leave the area for housing, or they have to leave the area for a new job. That's often what happens.
Yeah.
They lose their job here and the job they find is somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that can have some effect. The work schedule changing, like these daycares, they don't open at 6 a.m., right? But a lot of people have to be working today. We got a lot of shift work here in Johnston County, right?
Yeah.
Novo Nordisk, Grifols, we got a ton of biopharmaceuticals, we got a lot of manufacturing, Caterpillar, right? Sometimes those people have to be at work before daycare's open. So how's the kid going to get to school? Who's going to supervise them in the morning? Who's going to be there when they get home in the afternoon? Where the after school care at school ends at 5. The shift doesn't end at 7 p.m. What are we going to do in the interim? So all of that stuff can ultimately affect custody as well if you have a job situation. Hopefully you don't, but if it does, but that sometimes can cause a change in circumstances.
Yes. Okay. And kind of back to the first question, but also now to the it kind of ties into the second. So what if, because you talked about filing for bankruptcy and credit card debt and all of that, what if that happens after the divorce, right? Because maybe they didn't budget correctly and then now they're, in credit card debt and whatnot. Does that affect it? Or as long as they're providing for the kids?
I don't think bankruptcy affects a custody case, but I can tell you that if you have any joint debts that you didn't resolve prior to the divorce that are still out there and you've not gotten them separated, if somebody files for bankruptcy, the person not filing for bankruptcy is then responsible for those debts. Okay. And so it only discharges one, and all those creditors are going to come after the other person that didn't file for bankruptcy. So if you're going to file for bankruptcy as part of the divorce, file it together and prior to the divorce if possible.
Oh,
okay. I think that is very important. I'm not a bankruptcy attorney, but that back to the word we talked earlier, these joint debts, one side goes and files for bankruptcy, the creditors are going to come after the other person. and so that becomes important
they
as
assume
well.
they're the ones that if they're not filing for bankruptcy, they must have money. So
Right. And the creditors are going to want to get their money. So that becomes very important too. Another reason why you need to get is financially separate as quickly as possible so that you're not affected by any financial decisions that the other spouse makes after you divorce.
Yes. And as long as, like you said, it doesn't affect housing, it doesn't affect anything else, it probably won't affect custody.
Correct. It almost certainly is not going to affect custody because it doesn't have any.
Provided for.
Right. The kids are being provided for, and it actually, bankruptcy often helps because, you end up with more disposable income because maybe you've gotten rid of some debts that you were paying on that you're no longer paying on. Maybe you can, get out of some of that stuff. Like I said, I'm not a bankruptcy attorney.
Rebuilding your
right.
credit.
Right. But I do think if you've gotten in the situation where, you're going to file for bankruptcy, it's not from some medical bills that popped up because you had an accident, you probably do need to look at some credit counseling and stuff so you can learn a little bit more about budgeting and stuff like that. But it's key. And also, often in marriages, one person does all the finances and one person doesn't.
Yeah.
And if you're the one that doesn't and you don't understand the finances, you need to understand it, but you also need to understand the finances for yourself. Like, that becomes very important too, where you got to pay your own bills, make your own budget, get some help, ask your friends, talk to a local Edward Jones agent. I mean, your attorneys can help to some level. There are certified divorce financial planners out there.
Yes.
There's tons of those people. Go talk to one of them. They'll be glad to help you.
Yeah. And I thought you talked previously on an episode about, places like Harbor House who offer free classes as far as like financial budgeting and whatnot.
I think they do. I think Harbor House, as part of some of their domestic violence classes, would be
because a lot of those women or
some basic finances
don't
as well.
have any control over the finances and have no idea what's going on.
So. Right. So it's very important. So what I want y'all to take from this episode is you need to get completely separate by the time you're getting divorced. Maybe not in the first 3 weeks. Get completely separate. Run a credit report. See what's out there. Make sure everything's separate. Separate bank accounts. Separate everything as if you never knew the person you divorced. That's going to be crucial. And then you will only have to be responsible for what decisions you make, and they can't make a decision that affects you moving forward. We would like to thank Raina Birch for coming on and being asking me these questions on this special edition episode of the Best Johnston County podcast, Ask Jonathan Breeden Anything, where we talked about what you should do about financial documents and stuff once you are divorced. If you have any questions about what you heard on this podcast, about what you should be doing while you're in a divorce or thinking about a divorce, reach out to us here at the Breeden Law Office at 919-661-4970 or reach out to us at breedenfirm.com. We'll be glad to sit down and talk to you about your specific situation and advise you on what you can and cannot do moving forward. As we mentioned earlier, please like, follow, subscribe to this podcast wherever you see it. Give us a 5-star review down below. Share it if you're in your social media. Tag us in your Instagram stories, Best of Johnston County. That way, more and more people know about the Best of Johnston County podcast. We enjoy bringing it to you, and we're going to continue doing it. And we want as many people to know about it as possible. Until next time, I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden.
That's the end of today's episode of Best of Johnston County, a show brought to you by the trusted team at Breeden Law Office. We thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to sharing more interesting facets of this community next week. Every story, every viewpoint adds another thread to the rich tapestry of Johnston County. If the legal aspects highlighted raise some questions, help is just around the corner at www.breedenfirm.com.